Hello, my name is Matt Lawrence. I'm an assistant professor of mechanical engineering technology at Alfred State College. My goal today is to show you the 5-column format approach to solving engineering problems in Microsoft Excel. There is an accompanying handout that goes with the instruction today. I hope that you've printed this out from the Alfred State Technical Library, and we will be working from this sheet of paper today. And on this sheet of paper is our assignment. What we're trying to do is we're trying to use the 5-column format solution to find the answer to a simple word problem. Find the cross-sectional area of an 8-inch diameter water main pipe. Let's launch Microsoft Excel. I'm using the 2010 version, and in an earlier chapter in the technical library, we went over some merging and formatting that you can do in these spreadsheets, which I'll be doing along the way. All word problems can be broken up into 3 main sections. Problem inputs, skip a few rows. Intermediate calculations, skip a few more. And finally, outputs. I'm going to make these 3 bold. And I'm going to populate inputs, intermediate calculations, and outputs on my way to this problem solution. Now, just as a little guide here, I'm going to tell you what these 5 columns are. The 5 columns we'll be using will be the variable name, the second column will be a description. The third will be the value. The fourth, that's the location or the column for the units for the value. And then we have the 5th column for comments and equations. Great. I think that any professor you hand this work into will be very happy that you've laid the problem out like this, because it shows all the steps that you've taken on your way to the solution. Now, I wouldn't hand this in if I were to print it out, so I'm going to put this in italics so you know we're just putting that up there so we can define what these 5 columns are we're going to use. This particular problem, we're only given one input value, and that's the diameter of the pipe. So let's give it that a name. Pipe underscore diameter. Never use a space for a variable name, always use an underscore. We'll use a description. The value is 8 and the units are inches. And that's where the number came from. So those are the only inputs provided in this problem, so I'm going to get rid of these 2 rows. Now, what do we have to learn, or what do we have to determine on the way to finding area? Well, we know that area for a circle is pi r squared. However, an intermediate calculation would be to determine the radius from the diameter. So let's do that. The pipe radius. The description for that can be the radius of the water main pipe. And what's the value here? Well, we know that radius is 1/2 of the diameter for a circle. But what we want to do is we want to show where that number came from. So I'm going to use pipe diameter in my little equation here. So what I want you to do is highlight from the variable name all the way over to the value. And under the Formulas tab in Excel, select Create from Selection. There are many options here in this dialog box. We want the name to be created from a value in the left-hand column, so we want to keep that checked. And now we can use pipe diameter in our equation. So what is the pipe radius? Well, if you've never typed an equation into Excel, you start with an equal sign, And the pipe radius is equal to the pipe diameter, and you'll see that that variable name will pop up. Excel knows that you want to use that in the equation. So you can double click it, and radius is pipe diameter divided by 2. And we get 4 inches. Now, where did that number 4 come from? Well, if you typed it in, you know it's 1/2 of the pipe diameter. But how are you going to communicate that to a teacher, professor, or colleague? Let's show the equation in the 5th column. The way that you can do that is copy the cell that has the value and paste it in the 5th column. You can select the very first option, and you get a value error. It does that because you have an equation in here rather than a comment or an equation. So if you double click on value and you put a single apostrophe in front of the equal sign, you will see that your equation will show up. Now that's very handy. And what we have now is a working document. What I mean by that is if we change the pipe diameter, that change will be reflected in the radius. So I'll demonstrate that now. If you change the pipe diameter from 8 inches to 10 inches, you can see that the pipe radius changes to 5. So that means if you have many problems that are very similar, they only vary in what the actual input value is, you can do one solution with the 5-column format solution and solve all the problems very quickly. I'm going to make the diameter 8 inches as prescribed on the problem. That's our only intermediate calculation. So the last thing that we have to do is calculate the cross-sectional area. So let's call this pipe area. How can we describe that? Cross-sectional area of the water main. And now we want to determine the pipe area with the equation pi r squared. Well, we know the radius is up here, the pipe radius, so we have to square this value and multiply it by pi. We have to do the same thing we did before. Let's assign a name to pipe radius by highlighting, create from selection, left column. Now we can use pipe radius in our equation. So we want to put an equation in here that's pi times pipe radius squared. Well, for the value pi in Excel, you can just type in pi, open and close parentheses, and we're going to multiply that by pipe radius squared. Like that. Pi r squared. And we get a value that has far too many significant figures. We'll fix that in a little bit. But we know that the units for this are square inches. I'll show you how to do a superscript. Highlight the number 2. Right-click number 2. You format the cell. Make it superscript. Now, where did that number come from? Well, it came from an equation. Let's go through the process again of showing the equation on the 5-column format. We're going to copy what's in our value cell. We're going to paste the equation here. We have to insert a single apostrophe before the equal sign. And now it'll show up with an equation. Now let's go to the Home tab and fix the decimals here. There's far too many decimal places, so we can reduce those with this button. So we have our answer. Now, if I delete these columns at the top, I have a very good solution with inputs, intermediate calculations, and outputs. And if you were to print this out for a professor or a teacher or a colleague, he or she would have a very easy time understanding where all of your numbers came from. And like I said earlier, we can now model pretty much any water main. If we had a 12-inch water main, we can instantly figure out what the radius and the area are. But keep in mind, you can only change an input value. You can't change the value where an equation was used. So only change the input values. And I'll change it back to an 8. And that's the demonstration. Don't forget to save your work. And thanks for listening to this tutorial.